Hello everyone, how's it going, and welcome to today's Wild Rift guide. In today's guide, we're taking a look at the Burning Vengeance brand. Brand is an AP mage. He's primarily played in the mid lane, however, he can be played as a duo lane carry or even as a support. Brand is a fun skill shot based champion that has a lot of damage and crowd control that can help him and his team at all stages of the game. Taking a quick look through the build with Brand, you want to make sure you build items that give you a lot of ability power, as most of Brand's damage comes from his abilities and his combos, which I'll explain a little bit later on. For the first item, we have RUNES, just a great first item overall that gives you ability power, gives you a little bit of maximum mana, which helps out a lot in the early game, and also a little of ability haste, and then the Disordic Echo passive as well, just allows you to deal that little bit of extra damage. With this build, we're more going for a utility build, so we've got RUNES Crystal Scepter, which gives you maximum health, and also a little bit of ability power, but the main purpose of this item is to do with the Icy passive, damaging active abilities and empowered attacks slow enemies by 20% for 1 second. And the great thing with Brand is that you're going to be spreading damage a lot. The damage from Brands is going to be bouncing to multiple enemies, so you'll be able to slow multiple enemies as well, which is very useful. Only stasis as the boots, and the boots upgrade. Only boots is kind of no surprise, just giving you that little bit of ability haste, so the cooldown gets reduced on your abilities. And also stasis enchant. The problem with Brand is that he doesn't have a lot of mobility, so the stasis enchant will help you a lot if any assassins or any bruisers are diving on top of you. The next item, the Leandri's Torment, it has been nerfed quite a bit, but it works really well with RUNES Crystal Scepter. Again, gives you a little bit more maximum health and ability power. You deal more damage, you deal percentage more damage for each second in combat against champions, and it capped at 6% for 5 seconds. The great thing with Brand is that most of abilities do damage over time, so as long as you stay close to them, then you'll pretty much always be in combat, so the Mandus passive will pretty much always be active. But the main purpose is for that Torment passive, damaging abilities and empowered attacks, deal 1% of the enemy's maximum health as bonus magic damage over a few seconds, and this damage doubles if they are slowed or immobilized. So the combination of RUNES Crystal Scepter and Leandri's Torment is great, because Leandri's Torment damage gets increased because your RUNES Crystal Scepter will slow enemies, so it basically gets doubled, which makes the item a little bit better than what it will be normally. Obviously, you got Rabadon's Death Cap, just gives you a lot of ability power and increase your overall ability power as well, and then you have Void Staff for the magic penetration. Now, looking at this other build, if you don't want to go for utility building, if you don't want to be more tanky, if you want to do a lot more burst damage, then this is a better build in my opinion. Obviously, Luden's Echo is already there. You can go for something like Prophet's Pendant as a tier 2 item. Just gives you a lot of damage. It gives you that magic penetration early on. The boots is the same. Then you got Death Cap, Void Staff, but then you build items like Morella Nomicon. Grievous Wounds works really well on Brand. As I said, most of the damage does spread across multiple enemies, so being able to apply Grievous Wounds to multiple enemies is very useful. And then the Prophet's Pendant can be upgraded into Infinity Orb. This item allows your abilities to crit when the enemy is below 35% health, and again, just gives you more magic penetration and move speed, which is very useful. But the runes, Electrocute, great rune for Brand. I'll mention a little bit about the combos later on, but Brand's combos are quite easy to hit, and if you do hit the combos quite efficiently, then you'll be able to do a lot more damage with Electrocute, and especially because it's on a lower cooldown now as well. Brutal, just a nice rune to just give Brand a little bit of AP early on. If you do want to scale into the late game, I think Gathering Storm on AP champions is actually not bad at all. It gives you a lot more AP than obviously the AD champions. Other than that, there's not really anything else. You can go for weakness if you go for a support build, or if you play Brand as a support, just allow your team to deal more damage. For the second rune, Adaptive Carapace, gives you that maximum health early game and gives you the extra armor or magic penetration depending on how much damage you was dealt when you drop below 50% health. Again, you can go for Hunter Titan if you're against a lot of crowd control, but most of the time I like to go for Adaptive Carapace just to get that little bit of early game advantage. And then you have Sweet Tooth as your final rune, just to increase the Honey Fruit healing and also gain a little bit of extra gold. And for the summon spells, you got Flash and Barrier. You can swap out Barrier for Ignite if you want to try and play more aggressive, but I think Barrier is just a safer option for Brand, because sometimes you want to stay back and you want to use your abilities, so you might not get within Ignite range, and obviously Exhaust can help out as well. So yeah, that's a quick rundown of the build. Let's move on to Brand's abilities. First up, let's take a look at Brand's passive, which is Blades. Brand's ability set enemies ablaze, dealing percentage of their maximum health as magic damage over time. And stacking a blades 3 times on champions and large monsters causes them to detonate after a few seconds, dealing even more magic damage. And enemies that detonate cannot stack a blaze again for a few seconds. So all this is just basically knowing that all of your abilities will just be able to deal damage over time. And when you stack 3 abilities on top of each other, so say if I use my E, my Q and my W, you can see that there's an area effect around it, and then after a few seconds it will detonate, dealing more damage. So pretty self-explanatory, but what makes Brand's combos really strong. For the first ability, we have Sear, which launches a fireball that deals magic damage to the first enemy hit, and if the enemy is already ablaze, Sear stuns for 1.5 seconds. So just a skill shot ability that throws out a fireball in any direction that you want to. It can just deal damage, as you can see there. It will just deal damage over time because of the passive. As mentioned, if the enemy is already ablaze, so say for example if I use my third ability, you can see that an enemy champion is already ablaze by looking just underneath. You can see the stacks, and then use your first ability straight afterwards. You can see that the target dummy will be stunned. It's a pretty simple combo where you can use your third ability, your first ability, and then your second ability to get an easy proc of your passive. Speaking of the second ability, we have Pillar of Flame. After a short delay, fire erupts at a location, dealing magic damage to enemies, and if the enemies are ablaze, then Pillar of Flame deals 30% more damage to enemies. This is why most of the time you want to go for your third ability, then your first ability, and finish on your second ability, just to make sure that your Pillar of Flame will be able to deal more damage. So as you can see, it's an AoE ability that you can use. You can hit it on multiple enemies if you want to, and it's a great AoE ability, and what makes Brand really strong during a laning phase, because you can use this as a poke tool. As I mentioned, if the enemy is already ablaze, it will just deal bonus damage. That's all it is really. Moving on to Brand's third ability, which is Conflagration. Ignite enemies near the target, dealing magic damage, and if the target is already ablaze, then Conflagration spreads even further. So all it is, it's just a point and click ability basically. It's the only ability that is not going to be a skill shot for Brand. So all it is, you just tap on an enemy target dummy or anything like that. But the great thing about this is if the target is already ablaze, so say if I use an ability afterwards, so if I use my first ability and then my third ability, you can see that it spreads across multiple enemies. So you can use this on top of your other abilities as well to just deal a lot of damage and get multiple stacks as well of your passive when it detonates. And for Brand's ultimate, we have Pyroclasm, which releases a torrent of flame that bounces up to 5 times between enemies or himself. Each bounce dealing magic damage, and if the target is ablaze, then Pyroclasm briefly slows by 50%. Now, as you can see, as mentioned, you know, it can bounce off yourself as well, which I think is a really important thing to note. So say, for example, you're in a 1 versus 1 situation. Don't be worried and don't be scared to use your ultimate, because as you can see here, it can bounce between myself and the target dummy every single time for the bounce. But if you want to try and use it on other people, I accidentally put the target dummy in tower range, so now it's going to be really annoying with all the tower shots. If I quickly use a few more target dummies in an area, you can see that what will happen is if I use my ultimate, if I don't stand nearby, then the ultimate will just be able to bounce across multiple enemies, which is very useful. And obviously the main purpose and the main point of the ability is that bounces always attempt to try and max stack blaze as well. So even if there's a third enemy nearby, like in this situation, it will always focus on trying to bounce between 2 people because it wants to try and stack a blaze, your passive, as much as possible. Speaking briefly about combos, there's 2 combos that I want to show you. One that you use pre-level 5 and one which is like an all-in combo. The one before level 5 is the one that I've kind of already mentioned you. This is for the laning phase. You want to use your third ability, your first ability to stun, and while the enemy is stunned, you want to use your second ability. This will mean that your Pillar of Flame will be able to deal more damage, your first ability will stun, and it just gives you time to land the Pillar of Flame. It's a pretty easy self-explanatory combo. And then for all-in combo, it's a little bit different. You want to use your third ability, your ultimate, then your Q, and then your W. So be able to get a little bit more slows off with your ultimate, your W will be able to deal more damage, and your Q will still be able to slow. So obviously during team fights, you want to make sure that you use your Pyroclasm, you use all your abilities so you can slow enemies, stun them, deal more damage, and spread all your damage across multiple enemies. Take a look at the skill order for Brand. At level 1, you want to go for your second ability. This allows Brand to play very, very safe, and you can use this ability to poke early on. You then want to go for your first ability. You can try and combo your second and your first ability to land the stun in the early game, in the early laning phase. But level 3 is really where you come online, and you can use that pre-5 combo in the laning phase. Just make sure you be careful when you try and land the combo, because if you're against champions like Alistar, Blitzcrank, Thresh, when you try and walk up and when you try and use your abilities, it can be quite difficult and you can be caught out. Now, the main ability that you want to max is your second ability, obviously making sure that you level up your ultimate as soon as possible. The main thing about the second ability is that it will deal the most damage for you. Out of all 3 of these abilities, it will allow you to deal more damage. And you want to go for your first ability for the cooldown, just so you can try and get multiple stuns off during a team fight. And then your last ability you want to go for and max is your third ability. Then after that, once you reach level 15, once you get maximum items and everything under your belt, you'll be able to use all your abilities to stun, slow, and deal a lot of damage to multiple enemies. Alright, onto the gameplay with Brand. Now with Brand, the main kind of thing with him is in the laning phase, you have to play very, very safe with him. The problem with Brand is that early game you don't really do a lot of damage. You can do that pre-5 combo that I explained earlier on, but you don't really do a lot of burst damage. You can't really trade that much. I'm with a Thresh this lane, so if I can land a stun, or a Thresh can land a hook, then we'll be able to combo our damage and combo our abilities. Our abilities very, very well. In this game, I think I'm going to go for a little bit of a different build as well. I'm going to completely skip out Luden's Echo. You can do this as an option. You can just go for like Rylai's or Liandry's Tournament as a first item, and then build the other item after that, and then go for Deathcap, Void Staff, and Morellonomicon. The only problem with that build is that you don't really have a lot of mana, so then you kind of have to be careful of how many abilities that you're going to be using during team fights and everything as well. You can see in the early game here, Kai'Sa is by herself, so we're just trying to zone out the Kai'Sa as much as possible. She blows Flash in the early game, which is quite nice. So the great thing about the second ability and why it's so good in the early game is that you can play very passive. It has a lot of range, you can play very passive, and you can just use it to poke champions in the early game. You can see that I'm going to walk up here. I'm going to try and use my second ability again. Unfortunately, it gets missed because the kind of an anti-synergy combo there. That you can see the Thresh hooked the Janna out of my W. But still, it was a fairly decent trade overall. I'm going to try and push this lane as much as possible, just so we can get a little bit of lane control. As you can see, the Fiora is roaming down into the Dura lane. Thresh is going to walk up. I'm going to try and use my abilities, and I can get an easy stun combo onto Kai'Sa, and then that combos with my damage over time and my abilities to get a nice and easy kill on Kai'Sa. You can see the combo that I just mentioned there. You know, if Thresh lands a hook, then I can use my pre-5 combo after that. I can use my third ability, my first ability to stun, and then use my second ability to deal a lot of damage. Again, I'm trying to land my EQ combo. Unfortunately, it misses because, again, a little bit of anti-synergy there. Thresh uses a flay to get away. Kha'Zix tried to jump onto us, but unfortunately he couldn't, and a tower dive, or the invade, sorry, I should say, doesn't really work out for him. So, a decent early game start for us. We got a kill onto Kai'Sa, which is always very nice to get a little bit of an early game lead. You can see we get the Haunting Guys already. And the great thing about Haunting Guys as well, as I already mentioned briefly, is that Brand always deals damage over time with his abilities. So it allows you know, Liandry's Torment and Haunting Guys to deal more damage, which is very, very helpful. And then the combination of Liandry's Torment and Rylai's Crystal Scepter also allows Liandry's to deal more damage. So it's just a great item overall for Brand. And, you know, the damage is not really there. It doesn't do as much damage as maybe, you know, the burst damage build that I explained earlier. But it's still a really, really good build that offers a lot of slows, a lot of utility, and just allows you to be a little bit tanky as well, because as I mentioned, Brand doesn't have a lot of mobility, and Brand can definitely struggle. So you can see we have a bit of an early game lead. We got 1 kill and 1 assist in the early game. You can see the wave clear as well for Brand is quite disgusting. You can just use Pillar of Flame at range and just use all your abilities really, really well. You can see here that the hook does land onto Janna. Unfortunately, I don't have my EQ combo, but what I'm using my ultimate and then my Q afterwards to stun onto Kai'Sa. And all that damage over time as well with my second ability. Because the Kai'Sa is already ablaze, it deals 30% more damage. And we get another kill. Wasn't really according to plan. I was trying to land the stun onto Janna. But as you can see, there's loads of different combos that you can do with Brand, which is what I find great. But the main thing that I would say with Brand is always try and save your first ability, because you always want to try and use your first ability as a stun. You don't want to use your first ability and then combo it with other abilities afterwards, unless the champion is already, you know, in CC, and then you can just use it for extra damage as well, or to proc Pillar of Flame Ablaze. But most of the time, you just want to keep Seer so you can use your other abilities. Like in that instance, I used my ultimate and then my Q afterwards. Or you can use your W, then your Q, or your E and then your Q. So it's always about using your Q as the second ability just so you can land the stun. But again, you can see the power of Thresh and Brand as a dual lane combo. Speaking briefly of why I like playing Brand in a dual lane compared to Brand in a mid lane. I feel like mid lane at the moment, there's a lot of AD assassins. There's a lot of just assassins in general and bruisers like Diana, Zed, Fizz as well can be really, really annoying. And kind of the weak side to Brand, which I mentioned already, is that it doesn't have a lot of mobility. And if champions stand on top of Brand, and if they try and one-shot Brand, then Brand doesn't really have any ways of escaping that. So it can be a little bit of struggle in the mid lane. Whereas in a dual lane, you have someone there to protect you. You can see that the laning phase is a little bit more passive as well. There's not really a lot of crazy fights happening or engages. Whereas in the mid lane, you can struggle. As you can see here, I'm using my Pillar of Flame, my second ability, on top of my Q. And then I'm also able to use my ultimate to spread all of the damage as well. And then after that, boom, double kill for the Brand, or triple kill I should say for the Brand. And here I try and go for the quadra kill, which I get as well, which was absolutely beautiful. Love to see it. So what I did there, I used my second ability to deal a lot of damage at range, because your W has the longest range for your ability. Then I used my Q afterwards on the Kai'Sa, which then I could use my ultimate to land the slows, because Kai'Sa was ablaze, and then it bounces across multiple enemies. And then because the enemies were still ablaze, I was able to use my second ability afterwards, and then Kha'Zix flashed on top of Janna. I got a nice and easy double kill there. And then obviously tower dive into Diana to get a quadra kill, which was very, very helpful indeed. 6-0-1 in the early game. Like I said, Brand, you don't really get to have this early game lead. So when you do, Brand just gets even stronger, even quicker. You can see I have my Leandri's Torment already. I'm going for the Rylai's Crystal Scepter. And then after that, I'm going to go for items like Death Cap and Void Staff. But again, the only problem with this build is that you run out of mana quite quickly. So you'll see here that I might be running into a little bit of trouble. Speaking of trouble, I got into a little bit of trouble there, but for now, I'm going to be A-okay. You can see the damage already that I'm dealing, you know. The second ability on top of the Q. The only thing with, you know, comboing your third ability and your first ability is that you have to get in range of your third ability, which can be very, very short. So sometimes it's just a lot safer to use your second ability and then your first ability. But there's a lot of combos overall that you can do with Brand. A lot of combos. And I feel like I could have explained a lot of combos as well in this guide, but I focused on two main combos, which we'll probably see in this game as well. The hook trying to land onto Kai'Sa, unfortunately doesn't land, but the flay on top of my EQ combo, and as you can see, the amount of burst damage that you could do with the crowd control as well. I use my E, my Q, and then my ultimate, which is your all-in combo, and then you're able to land your second ability afterwards to deal a lot of damage with your Pillar of Flame. So I'm going to go back to base now, pick up my Giant Spell, and then I will move towards the Rylai's Crystal Scepter. I go for Protobot this game. Protobot is another rune that you can take, or another boots upgrade, sorry, that you can take on Brand. If you feel like you don't need to survive a lot from burst damage, they don't have like a Zed or a Fizz. In this instance, for example, they've got champions like Set, Kha'Zix, and Diana, which Stasis doesn't really help against them. Like, you can use Stasis to stop the Diana ultimate, but then you're still going to be in trouble afterwards. The Protobelt allows me to dash away from them champions. You know, dash away from Kha'Zix, dash away from Diana, and Set as well. I still think Stasis is a better option. But Protobelt is also a great boost upgrade if you prefer to have a dash over having the Stasis or being able to come invulnerable. I'm just going to take a quick drink.
Top turret is under attack.
As you can see, as we're going into the mid game now, I'm going to use this to get the mid lane pressure. It's kind of what you want to do because Brand has so much wave clear as well. You can always get that mid lane priority. Nice stun there by the Lux. I try and land my combo afterwards as well, but unfortunately I wasn't able to. You see, I try and Protobelt forward. I use all my abilities and my ultimate, and then we're able to become godlike. Which is very, very surprising for a Brand, to be fair, this early on in the game, but You can see how much damage you could do overall. I mean, you can even use Protobelt in that instance if you really, really want to as well. You can see the wave clear combo there that I haven't explained yet, but you can use the second ability, Pillar of Flame, on top of your third ability, so then you can deal that damage. And as you can see here, my passive with the Thresh Hook is able to kill Brand. So then, there again, I wasn't in range for my third ability, so I used my second ability, and then I used my Seer on top, so my first ability on top, and then I used my E to get the detonation of my passive. So we're in a bit of a difficult situation here. You can see I use my combo again, my EQW. It's the most basic combo that you will use all the time with Brand. It's just something that you really need to get used to. If you want to master Brand, if you want to play Brand, then you need to make sure you always use EQW. EQW. Just keep that in your head constantly throughout the whole game. You can see I'm running low on mana here because I don't have Luden's Echo, which is kind of the point that I was mentioning a little bit before. My Renekton is going really, really ham at the moment. I used my ultimate here. I'm actually not too sure why I used my ultimate. Maybe I thought the spread damage would have been enough to try and bounce across multiple enemies, but unfortunately it wasn't. And we get into another stalemate. So 7-0-3. We're at a situation now where we have a lot of wave clear, we have a lot of damage, we can go back and get our Rylai's Crystal Scepter as well, which we're going to do. And you'll see the power of Rylai's Crystal Scepter now as well. You'll see the power of this combination with the two items. As you can see, I'm going to also go for Death Cap. So once you get 3 items, once you get your Liandry's, Rylai's Crystal Scepter, and Death Cap, you deal a lot of damage. And I mean a lot of damage. Obviously, if you go for Luden's Echo, it kind of delays really the power spike of the Rylai's, the Liandry's, and Death Cap. But honestly, it is so much better to go Luden's in my opinion, because you don't feel like you run out of mana, and it helps you a lot more in the early game as well. It helps you with the wave clear, and it helps you just trade and stay in the laner phase a lot more. See, I'm using a burst damage here. I'm using my poke from my ultimate, and as you can see, I use my Protobelt to dash away, and then Lux gets their kill. So you can do a situation there with the great thing about Brand with the stuns as well is that you can use it to stop enemies as well using ultimates like Diana's ultimate. So that's the situation I did there. Alright, okay, we're back. Sorry about that. I think I did a bit of a situation where the rendering didn't go too well on the video. But yeah, as I was explaining just briefly, my reaction time for trying to stun the Diana, unfortunately, wasn't quick enough. But you can get a really quick stun off because the abilities of Brand do happen quite quickly. I wouldn't recommend going WQ, like second ability into Q, into first ability, sorry, because your second ability can take quite a long time until it lands. But if you just use your third ability and then your first ability, you can land a quick and easy stun. So you can see we're going for the Rift Herald this game. Yeah, this game is pretty much in the bag. We're 7-0-5 at the moment, 11 minutes into the game. I even take the Rift Herald as well, which is nice and dandy. Allows me to go back to base much sooner. But as you can see throughout this game, I'm not sure if you've realized, but you can tell that my mana is a little bit of a struggle this game. If you do go for this build, I would recommend going for Mana Flow Band. Mana Flow Band is very, very helpful on Brand if you're going for this type of build. You can see the team fight's about to start. I'm just going to use my second ability. You can see the Pillar of Flame allows you to do AoE slows as well with Rylai's Crystal Scepter, which would be quite nice. Diana's off to the side. I'm just going to use my abilities soon. Use my E, use my Q. Unfortunately, it missed. But all I'm doing here is just trying to zone away the Diana and the Kai'Sa. But here, I was Diana. Lux was able to land a really, really good stun onto Kai'Sa and got a kill. You can see that I use my EQ here to move away from the Diana. You can see I'm going to use my flash. I'm going to probably use my Protobelt here. There you go, to create the distance between me and Diana. So again, it's not really about the damage sometimes with Brand, it's about staying alive. So I use my flash because I tried to walk one way, I saw the Kha'Zix, I was like, oh wait, I need to go back to the other way. So I flashed, I used my Protobelt, and you can see after that I was able to do enough damage. Again, Brand could be used as a primary engage, but most of the time you want to use Brand as like a secondary engage. You know, once the Lux binding hits, once the Thresh Hook lands, then you can use that to land hooks afterwards. As you can see, a problem here is our mana. Our mana is very, very low. We don't have any mana regeneration or anything like that, or we don't have any more maximum mana. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but we're still all good. Yeah, after this, I'm probably going to go for Void Staff and then Morella Nomicon. I can't remember how much longer this game actually lasts. I think I recorded this in patch 3.0a, so it's not not up to date, quote unquote, but to be fair, nothing really changed in patch 3.02 B anyway. The only thing that actually did change was Electrocute. I feel like Electrocute is a lot better now than Conqueror on brand. And before, Conqueror is actually pretty good on brand because the Electrocute didn't really feel like it did a lot of damage and was on quite a long cooldown. But now I feel like Electrocute is better. You can see the Janna is in a little bit of a tough spot, unfortunately. I used my ultimate, and then you can see Janna is going to die eventually from my damage over time. Actually, no, she didn't. She actually survived. Oh, no, there you go. She did die eventually. Took a little bit of time, but she died eventually. Diana did land a really, really good ultimate, but unfortunately it was enough. But yeah, you got like the difference between Electrocute and Conqueror, where Electrocute is really, really good for burst damage, and I think it's quite good after the recent buffs to patch 3.0b. Conqueror before was just better because Conqueror was Electrocute wasn't really that good, but Conqueror is quite good if you're able to stay in fights for a lot longer, which obviously with this build with not a lot of mana you can't really do that. But as you can see, the game is about to end here, and we finished the game off with unfortunately dying once. Unfortunately we did die once, but 9, 1 and 8 on the brand in the end. Very, very clean game overall. You can see the combos and you can see everything that brand has to offer. I would say he's like a fairly decent, you know, A+ tier champion at the moment in both the dual lane and the mid lane. See, 22,000 damage overall as well, most damage in the game, and a very, very strong performance overall by ourselves. But that's it. That's everything for the brand guide for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you all had a great time. As always, stay tuned for the next Wild Rift guide, which will be coming up very, very soon, which will be on Brom. So stay tuned for that. Take care. See you soon. Peace.